This happens all the time. See, it doesn't bother me in the slightest because this is my life. So, you know.
Hey man, you wanna get a job working with computers? Like, no.
Yeah.
No. No. Alright, can you all hear Jack? Bill says fuck computers. I agree. Well, they say not yet because I don't know if he's talking. Mr. Jack Badelaire, everybody.
Yep. I'm right here. And I've closed the Twitch stream, so I'm not seeing that, so I don't see the chat. People could be calling me awful, awful things in there, and I'd never know.
I don't think they are.
Now's your time, world. Take it out on me.
All right, so I think we are here. They're talking about awful things. But this was a little bit of an initial disaster, and for that I sort of apologize. But we are now up and running, and if you'd care to, go ahead and introduce yourself. I think everything should all be now smooth and clear and fine and great. The Team House Stream says, yeah, this reminds me of my first 75 live streams. Non-stop problems. You would have thought that by now this would be easier, but no. It just gets worse.
Yeah.
So, on this particular episode, now you and I have interacted on Twitter. We've talked a little bit through Flixology. We've talked about writing. We've talked about all that sort of stuff. And lately, we shared some rage the other day about some lead kiting issues. And so we decided, hey, let's have a collaboration issue and talk about some things that maybe some people who are especially looking to get into this aren't necessarily familiar with. And so I sent you a list of some questions, and in true interview style, I'm going to start at the top and move through the bottom. So the first question being, what was your initial spark that led to, I want to try and quote, be a writer? Quote.
A lot of quotes. It's a lot of air quotes.
That's a lot, but I like using them, so.
All right. So, well, let's see. I've got paragraphs here, but if I keep just reading the paragraph. So, I guess long story short, like a lot of people who go into writing, at least long term, I was always a storyteller. It was something that I always did as a little kid. I would draw stories before I could really write coherent stories, and then I wrote stories that horrified my grade school and junior high teachers, because as a little kid I was reading Vietnam memoirs and like just stuff that no like 8 or 9-year-old should be putting into their head at that age. So but when I got to high school, and I had a computer by the time I was a sophomore, and before that I even had an electric typewriter. So I was always generating a story in my head, and I was always looking for an outlet to put it on paper or on disc or whatever. And I guess the thing is that after a while, you begin to sort of realize, as long as you're not a complete dreamer and be like, I'm going to sit down at this typewriter and crank out a manuscript, and then I'm going to put it in a little cardboard box, and I'm going to send it off to a publisher. Yeah, I realized that was a foolish notion, and I kind of just let it fade away. And at the same time, I kind of got into like tabletop role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons and stuff like that, and that kind of scratched that creative storytelling itch for a while. And time passed, and for a long while I ran a book blog where I reviewed and talked about old pulpy novels and action movies and things like that. And I began associating with a lot of different writers, some of them who were aspiring, some of them were these old salts that had been written, writing back in the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s, people who had long careers doing this and wrote dozens of books, and then the sun kind of set on them, and then they started talking about how there was this thing called Kindle Direct Publishing, and Amazon was offering this. And I started seeing out there writers who would take their backlists, because in a lot of cases they would reach out to these old publishing houses and all these old imprints, and they would get back their rights, which is something that doesn't always happen, but if you're lucky, does happen if you're smart about it. And they started re-releasing their old backlists, and these guys were actually making money. These are people who probably hadn't made real cash on writing 20 or 30 years in some cases.
Mm.
And suddenly they were collaborating with cover artists and, book layout people. And they were actually able to start making money again off of stuff that have been out of print for years or even decades. And, we were all sort of bouncing ideas off each other in the book blogging world. And, some of us were finally like, probably those of us, I think, largely, to be honest, in this sort of Gen X range of things, people who had grown up reading some of these people's books, or, having this idea of like, oh, it'd be kind of great to become a storyteller and get paid for it. But we were all kind of jaded about that idea. And then it became like, well, we might be able to pull this off. So a few of us started doing our homework and putting stuff out there. And my first attempt, I recognized the fact that sitting down and cranking out a 90,000 or 100,000 word novel and releasing that into the world as my first attempt was very risky. So I decided to dip my toe in, and I wrote a short ghost story. Uh, and it's think about it, it's maybe like 7,000 words. You could read it, on your way to work one day, and made a little cover for it, wrote up a little description, and I put that on Amazon, and kind of sprinkled it out there, posted on my book blog, a couple things on Facebook, and you know made a couple of sales. I mean, we're talking pennies, but it was enough for me to understand the process of going from writing to getting a few people to read it and give me some feedback, and working up a rough but acceptable cover for it, the technical process of it. And from there, I wrote another short story, and by that point, I was working on my first real novel, Killer Instincts. And about, I believe it was sometime mid 2012, so about a year after uh, Killer Instincts got released out into the wild. And funny enough, I'm continuing on probably past the point where we should be cycling back, but what wound up happening was I released this book. A lot of book bloggers are like, hey, wow, I read this book. This is a really good book. I really enjoyed it. If you like old school vigilante violence, like, you should read it too. But in the process of writing it and editing it, I just hit a wall. I was like, I was probably 2 years on at this point, like in the editing process, and I needed a break. And I had known that the character I was writing about came from a family of military people, and I had this backstory of this grandfather who had been an Irish-born British commando, and I was like, you know what?
Ooh.
I just need to like write something else to just flush what's in my head out of my head. So I sat down, and in about 6 weeks, I wrote like a 40,000 word commando novel, and that helped. That just shook everything free, and Killer Instincts went out into the wild soon after. And yeah, there was a few initial sales, but then kind of nothing. It just sort of petered out, and it was like, is there anyone out there? Does anyone like this? Like, what am I doing here? That's my baby. It's been born. And so I finally was just like, you know what? Fuck it. There's this other thing. I'm gonna throw it out into the wild, and so Operation Arrowhead, which is the name of it, gets released, and I was like, whoopity doo, like, I've had it. It's out there. And, a couple weeks go by and I'm like, yep, there goes another fucking dud. Like, screw this. And then, it started selling. And I was like, oh, okay, finally someone sees it. That's nice. And then it kept selling. And I'm like, oh, okay, and then it kept selling and selling faster and selling more. And actually, especially in the UK, I was outselling over in England by like 3-1 compared to the States. And I was like, oh, are you fucking kidding me? This book that I worked for 2 years on, I'll sell like 3 copies a month. But this slapdash piece of shit that I knocked out in 6 weeks is just blazing past it. Okay, I guess I know what I'm writing now. And, after a few months, I wrote a sequel to that. And that started selling too. And what was really funny was there are these mailing lists, these free and bargain book mailing lists out there that you can subscribe to. And I was subscribing to some of them. And one of the things Amazon allows you to do is if you are enrolled in Kindle Unlimited, you can put your book out there for free for a few days as a promotional thing. And, I did it. I don't even remember if I paid anything for it or if I just put it out on social media. So I put Killer Instincts out for free for, 5 days. And, it was a trickle of free.
Free? Wait a minute. I was told that free was terrible. Don't do that.
Oh, no, you don't write for free, but you can promote for free.
No, good.
There's a difference, okay? But we're getting into sophomore level.
Oh.
We're going to wind back the narrative just a little bit. So what wound up happening was one of these mailing lists, in order to try and drum up business, it turned out that they would just sort of scour around and find free stuff and promote it without you even paying for it to show you, hey, look what we can do for you if you pay us. Because one day I was suddenly like you can look at your stats almost live. And I was like, holy fucking shit, there's like hundreds of free copies going out the door. What's happening here? And, I'm messaging friends. I'm like, am I seeing this correctly? Like, what's happening? And, buddies of mine are jumping on search engines and like looking to see, like, did a book blogger pick it up or what happened? And it turned out it was one of these mailing lists. And if I remember the numbers right, it was like 12,000 free copies of the book.
Whoa.
Went out into the wild. And and this is how the algorithms work out, is that when it raises you high enough up in like the free seller list, it just increases your overall visibility on the platform. And that means your other stuff becomes sort of visible because people see you and then they see what other books you have. So suddenly that plus everything else I had just started selling like crazy. And, that just kind of took off. And, I'm also getting way ahead of myself here. So that was kind of what buoyed me up enough to keep my sales, funny enough, at a point where I was like, okay, I got some reviews. I realized this stuff does sell. And we kind of went from there. And I'm not saying that it was entirely due to just this random promotional website, but it's an example of how luck does play an extraordinary part in this sort of stuff. And, that month I actually made more selling books than I did in my day job, which was pretty awesome. And, that's been the only month in which that's ever happened. But, it was pretty awesome. And, was definitely a solidifying moment in saying, you know what, this works and we can pull this off. And, that was probably somewhere in late 2012, I'd say. So I've been doing this since 2011. We're coming up on 10 years now since I published my first short story.
I have a question. I have a question here from chat. GZDR for Evie. Well,
What?
his username is GZDR4EV. I'm pretty sure that's probably like a word, and I don't want to butcher that. But he says, did he ever face a lawsuit from Microsoft or Rare for the name Killer Instinct, since that is the name of a video game?
No, you're not gonna. They can't sue you over things like that. Because if you just name something, it gets a little more complicated. If you are within the same media wheelhouse, it can get a little dicier. But no one has sued me because I named a book after the same name that doesn't happen. Go on to Amazon and just start Googling stuff like that. Or, well, don't go to Amazon and Google. You know what I mean.
Well, but I imagine that's
There's going to be books that are named the
right.
same thing as movies that are going to be named the same thing as tracks from songs.
Well, I imagine there's a little bit of the I'm a little guy and I'm going to get squashed. It'd be different if you're some giant mega guy and you go, well, our lawyers will jerk off your lawyers and together we'll all have a happy party. As opposed to, hey, man, you're a little fucking nobody. Change the name of your shit or we'll get you. And it's like, what's...
Well, it also depends. There's copyright and there's trademark. And again, I'm not an IP lawyer, but long story short, anyone can sue anyone for anything. I know an IP lawyer, and I talked to him about things like this, and he's like, anyone can sue anyone for anything. But
it's true.
When it comes to things like book titles, like, no, unless you are writing a book with the same title about the same thing, and it's obvious that what you're attempting to do is ride that rail, ride that notoriety. I could write a book about a short order cook named James Bond, and people kind of laugh at that. Oh yeah, he's a character in a book. They would really have a case to do anything. Again, sure, if some lawyer wants to go after me, I'd edit the manuscript and change that. But if I wrote about a British super spy named James Bond, maybe someone would get their underwear in a twist.
So
I love how one of the first questions here is trying to ask me if I got sued for something. That's real constructive out there.
Well, it's interact with chat, and I always like to flow with the people. So the second
being recorded.
Right. The second comment was, I'm sure Disney would sue if Netflix made a movie called Snow White and the Three Dwarfs. But the thing there is, A, that would be a movie, and B, you're filling in the whole specifics. That'd be like if he made a video game called Killer Instinct that was a fighting game that had characters that used... So I'm sure there's a little bit of a measure of, A, visibility of the thing, and B, how recognizable that is as a main name. I imagine if you made a video game called Snow White and that had nothing to do with any sort of characters and was nothing but a skyfall simulator of snow falling from the sky, maybe they would say, well, who gives a shit? But I don't know, maybe they wouldn't. And maybe it just comes down to also how vicious those lawyers are in protecting those names. Some of them may care more than others and may say, hey, we want you to remove this. Maybe they have a case, maybe they don't. Like they say, they could sue you for anything they wanted to, right? Well, it doesn't mean they'll win.
The other thing, too, is that, the term Killer Instinct is something that existed before anyone made a video game.
Right.
That's the other part of it. If you call your book Headshot, and there happens to be a video game out there called Headshot, well, who gives a shit? If I wrote a book called Cigar Glow Lounge, you might be like,
I made it, fam! I win!
That's not random. That's using, intellectual property that kind of belongs to you. But if I wrote a book titled Somewhere in Paris, where's the cause to go after? Is Paris going to sue me? No. So
I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, Parisians would take umbrage with it. So, what's funny is I'll sit down to teach like a 8-hour, 4-week course on self-publishing in a continuing education environment. And I'm expecting people asking me, deep theory kind of stuff. And they'll be like, no, I just signed up and paid the $120 to ask you, how do I make sure that my book doesn't get stolen? And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, well, what if someone gets this idea and they see it and they steal it from me? I've actually had students, and we go around the table and we're like, hey, what's everyone's book idea? And someone will be like, well, I don't want to say. And I'm like, well, what do you mean you don't want to say? Well, I'm a little worried someone's gonna steal it. It's like, stop, just stop. Like, no one, your idea is not unique enough, and B, even if someone does steal it, like, they're probably going to. I have actually, and I'm not going to get into it here because someone is working on a podcast about it. But one of my books was stolen and rewritten as another book by someone. And someone found this out by doing Google text searches and discovering that this person was writing books and then just altering them and putting them out as their own. Yeah, it's a long story. But anyhow, I just tried to break people of the fear. Like, no one is going to steal your idea, especially if you're not, some mega millionaire New York Times best-selling movie deal every time kind of top percent of 1% sort of person. Well, come up with another idea. If your idea is so unique and you're so fixated on it that you can't just say, fuck it, that didn't work, I'll come up with something else, then you need a little bit more courage to actually do this, not full time necessarily, but do it as a second job. So anyhow, that's one of my rants. I could go on for an hour just about that.
So, all right. So, I feel like you maybe. The second bullet point, the second question that I had here.
We're way off script right now. We're
true,
late.
But I feel like you sort of covered that. So I'm going to move down to this particular bullet point, which is so. If you had to quote unquote start over, what would you do differently? Or more succinctly, what startup advice would you give to someone who's going to try their initial foray into self-publishing?
So I think the second half of that question is probably the more pertinent one. I think to be brief in what I would do differently, I think trying really small short stories was probably not the wisest choice, although it worked. Like it teaches you the fundamentals of producing a document. Self-publishing is a very computer technical process. If you're not computer literate, don't try it, because you're going to do some bumbling computer foolish thing and it's all going to fall apart. But anyhow, I think trying to put out a large novel as my first work, as I discovered, I got so worked up in releasing this big, heavy-duty story that took me a year to write and a year to go through all the editing process. And then when it landed and it didn't take off, it was honestly pretty devastating. And yet, this little book that was less than half the length, which I cranked out in 6 weeks, did a couple of quick editing passes, asked a couple friends to just like, hey, just take a look at this Google Doc. Let me know what you think. If you find any typos, like, we'll deal with them. Probably about 2 months of effort in toto went into that book. And it's made me tens of thousands of dollars, So it's like, if you're going to start out at this, aim at like a novella and turn it into a series. Honestly, series sell. Series have more selling power as a whole than any multiple books that are not part of a series put together. If you sit down and write 3 individual novels that aren't really connected to each other and sell them, they will never do as well as a 3-book series, because readers read in series. They like to get invested in characters and your style and your voice, which may change from genre to genre. Um, and once they get invested, they want to keep reading about those characters and the kinds of adventures and things that happen to them. So if you put out 3 different books, yeah, maybe someone who really enjoys your writing style may read them, but in terms of a business view of it, it will not be as successful as writing a series of books with continuing episodic adventures. And maybe there's like a little arc to kind of tie things in. Think about episodic television. Like, that's how you want to look at it. And if you can produce something in the 30 to 40,000 word range, which is like a novella to short novel, and if you could put one of those out every 4 to 5 months, and you've got a decent cover, and you're not a complete garbage writer, you've got a shot at finding an audience and actually making decent cash at it.
I want to interject for just a moment and pick up on a particular thing you just said, which is the complete piece of garbage aspect. Now, I'm curious to your perspective on this, but I've had some people that I've talked to, and they get so caught up in the perfection aspect. The grammar has to be perfect. The spelling has to be perfect. All the stuff has to be perfect. And I said, look, I'm going to use an example, and I know a lot of people pick on it. 50 Shades of Grey is fucking trash. I mean, errors all over the place, but it didn't fucking matter. It didn't matter because the story and the content was good enough, and people just kept coming back for it. Why do you think people go to fast food all the time and eat all that stuff? It doesn't have, like, that last attainable percentage to be quote-unquote perfect is not necessarily worth chasing, especially if you're going to just be putting out more and more content. It'd be different if that's the one book you're going to put out ever in your life, and that's that.
Yes. So I'm trying to think of what. So here's, and the thing is, I don't teach writing. I'll teach self-publishing. I'll teach the business and the technical side of it. I'll teach some tips and tricks on marketing and pricing and cover copy and things like that. I'm not going to teach writing because honestly, I don't like to judge myself as a writer. If I do, I say I'm a 4 out of 5. Like, I'm good enough that people are going to buy it. If you actually go through and pour over all my Amazon reviews, the majority of them do not seem to ding me on writing.
Right.
Most of them are just sort of like, okay, Reed, that was fun. And that's fine by me. I have gotten actually very few 1-star reviews. And I know some of you sons of bitches out there going to Amazon right now. You're going to have a few bomb me. You fuck.
No, not anybody from this channel. We have some jokesters around here, but they did make me drink. You guys did make me drink Clamato. I'm just pointing that out there as a warning.
Jesus. I am not drinking Clamato, by the way. But no, you know what? You're absolutely right. And there are multiple philosophies you can apply towards this. You can simply say things like, you know what? Perfection is the enemy of good enough. And I 100% believe that. Also, especially when you're aspiring, I see people who get into that cycle of perfection chasing, and it just destroys them, and it destroys their entire motivation. You sit there and you grind away, and you hear people be like, "Oh yes, I've worked on this book for like 6 or 7 drafts," and I'm so worried about it. fight, is the story any good?
Right.
Are the characters
Yeah.
engaging?
Does anybody
Are
care?
does anyone care? Are you actually a good writer? Like, I've read plenty of people who are technically grammatically correct. And I'm not saying don't be a technically proficient writer. Please do not write like complete dog shit. But, you know, if that, I have to make sure that every turn of phrase lands on the ear with the tinkling of elven bells. Like, you will drive yourself insane. You will lose all motivation to work on it. And motivation is the number one thing that you need to maintain inside of you in order to get this done. Uh, so, you know, time and time again, genre fiction people have tried to figure out what it is. Like, what's the magic formula? And when it comes down to a story, people read books for story. They read it for engaging characters. They read it for entertainment. They read it because it falls into a genre that they like. Like Joseph Rosenberger wrote 70 some odd books in the Death Merchant series. And those are some dense, difficult to read, problematic as fuck books. But he sold like a madman because what he was able to do is write with great detail what a bullet does to the human body
Right.
when it hits at 3,000 seconds. Karate kicking someone in the groin so hard it shatters their pelvis. Like, his fight scenes were insane, and people kept buying his books. So, that's the thing. It's the same thing with 50 Shades of Grey. I've read all the book bloggers who take it apart chapter by chapter as if they're dissecting a corpse. And yeah, it's not well written, but it clicked on that weird psychic emotional kind of framework that pulled a certain demographic into it. And, that person is just swimming in cash now. So that's the thing. You don't need to be great. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be good, and you
Right.
need to be able to tell a good story. You need to tell something that engages the reader, that tickles a little bit of nostalgia, or it's a genre that they really enjoy. You know, that's the thing. Your book needs to have soul. You have to love what you're writing. And if you don't, like, Strunk and White is not going to save you. You know, and again, like I said, I'm not here to tell people to not be competent, technically proficient writers. Like, definitely learn some craft. But again, go out there and look at movie analyses are actually a better framework for this than books, because I think people still, when they review books and they talk about book craft, it still gets too into the weeds, still too like, oh, you're gonna make sure that your phrases land just on it. Reading and watching movie reviewers like on YouTube talk about story and structure, this is what they bring up time and time again, and be like, yeah, that was well shot film with, beautiful scenery and good camera movement, and the editing was well done. But no one cares about the story.
Right.
I'm not engaged with the characters. There's no emotion. That's what you need. And if you don't have it doesn't matter how good your cinematography is.
Is that kind of like Nice House, Nobody Home?
But
Like
what do you mean?
when people use the phrase like, "Oh, it's a nice house, but there's nobody home."
Oh, nice. I thought you said Knight's house.
No.
Oh, yeah. Nice house, no one's home. Yeah, exactly. Like, it's an attractive thing. And, you know, you can see this with a number of literary novels, that were written a number of years ago and, did very well. And then you see people cycle back to them now 30 or 40 or 50 years later and, give them fresh eyes. And they're like, yes, this person wrote very well. And, it's easy to, teach some of this in English lit class, but no one wants to read this now for a reason, So Anyhow, that's the thing. I mean, I come at this from a very hard genre fiction point of view. I'm not trying to ding literary fiction. I know a lot of people who write literary fiction and do very well at it. I can only speak about what I do and what I know. And when it comes to selling fiction, genre fiction is where it's at. And, you can write it quickly. It can be engaging. You can have fun plots and great characters and make money at it. and that's actually to be specific. It's not always about making money when you self-publish. Making money is good, as we've discussed before. Don't write for free,
Right.
but set goals for yourself in terms of what kind of money you're talking about. You see the people out there will drop their first book and they'll be like, "Oh, I'd love to dream one day of being a full-time writer." I know a lot of full-time writers, and as much as they enjoy it, you sitting at home. Basically, 2020 was what it was like to be a full-time writer for a lot of people. Well, except for the travel and the boozing it up at bars and such. But it's like
I mean, every night at 11 o'clock. I don't know anybody who does that.
It's very isolating. It's a grind. You wind up living in this imaginary world for months or years on end. And again, if you don't love what you're writing, you're going to exhaust yourself doing it very quickly.
I have a few comments and questions here from the chat, so I'm going to flip through those a little bit, and we'll give you some time to answer and think about those in short order. One of the questions was from Black Cat's Poppy, who just asks about, have you used anyone besides Amazon? For example, she bought a self-published book from Palais Publications, and then another statement was basically that the average person just wants to read a few pages before bed to help them fall asleep, and they don't necessarily want to read an intelligent book. And then we also have another comment that comes in and says, or rather is a question that says, so for a short story, how does one encourage others or re-inspire themselves to pick up the quill? And that's from Double D&D Girl. So if you want to take a few moments to mull those around or go back and paw through the chat yourself, I can sing a few bars of Easy Like Sunday Morning if you want to catch up on that.
Okay, what was the first one again?
Have you used any other self-publishing platforms other than Amazon? They had bought some stuff off of, I guess, Palais. I've never heard of that. But have you worked with anyone else besides Amazon for self-published content?
So here's the thing. I already see some people vibrating and getting all bunched up over Jeff Bezos and his giant fucking dragon hoard of gold that he sleeps on every night.
I gotta interrupt you for 1 second. Double D&D Girl did this. Fish heads, roly-poly fish heads, eat them up, yum-ta-ding. I forgot to turn my point redemptions off. So sorry about the interruption. I had to sing fish heads.
It's all right.
There's only one of those. I think there's 2 per stream, but there's like a 15-minute cooldown. So
you're tied to the wheel, the Twitch, and it will just grind you, whether you like it or not. So, short answer, no. I do it completely through Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing, Kindle Unlimited, which means contractually I can't sell ebooks through any other provider. Technically, I believe I can sell physical copies. In fact, Wolfpack Publishing, the company that I have contracted with to handle a chunk of my backlist, they sell through Kindle Direct Publishing and Kindle Unlimited ebooks, but I believe they use Spark. What is. It's some other print-on-demand publisher, not Amazon's print-on-demand publishing mechanism. So, and the thing is, a lot of people will say, like, don't put your eggs in one basket. If Amazon screws you, what are you going to do?
Right.
Yeah, I'll circle back to one of my evergreen tweets, which is any platform big enough to provide a creative person the audience and the infrastructure they need to make money doesn't care about you.
No.
And I'm not saying that in a evil galactic empire kind of way. You're just a hammer or a handbasket or a gallon of milk or any other product to them. And they have to treat you like that. There's no concierge service.
No.
If you are through one of Amazon's actual imprints, which they have those, they have an actual publishing arm, which functions like a traditional publisher. And actually, many people I know have gone through them, love them. It's sort of the best of both worlds where you're working with publishers, but their contracts and sort of the perks are a lot better than most traditional publishers, in my point of view. But that's the thing. Amazon is bigger than any of them. iBooks, fuck iBooks. Barnes and Noble, fuck Barnes and Noble.
Yeah, I mean they all crumbled.
About Kobo, like it, and talking to the guy who runs Wolfpack, who comes from a background of marketing and advertising. He is not a publisher. He decided to start Wolfpack Publishing as a means to sell a friend's backlist, actually. He knows a lot of old Western. Yeah, there's a whole other story, too. But anyhow, that's what he did. And, he's very good with the numbers. He's very good with the business side of things. And he says, you know what? Sure, Amazon's not a great company, but, neither is Apple. Neither is Barnes & Noble, really. And Amazon's Kindle Unlimited service, the by-page subscription service, will make you 99 times out of 100 more money per whatever book it is you happen to be putting out there than all those other platforms combined.
Well, that's got to be like, numbers on a spreadsheet sort of thing, right? The bigger reach to the bigger reach to the bigger reach. It isn't like they're investing $1 billion in your main that's all just, hey, the more people that bought and read this means the more percentage we get, and the more percentage we get. So yeah, why, like, that all just spreads out. You're part of that algorithm, right?
Well, and Kindle Unlimited is a subscription service, and
right.
People who tend to use it read a lot, and they just crank through books. And so they know that these people are better customers than your average Barnes & Noble ebooks reader or Kobo reader or whatever. So the thing is, I will never tell someone don't go wide, which is what they call it in terms of distribution. That's fine. I'm not going to tell you don't do it. But the thing is, if you're doing it for reasons other than necessarily dollars and cents and pages read and number of books delivered. And I'm not going to fault anyone for that. Amazon is not a great company, but in my opinion, neither is Apple, neither is Barnes & Noble. No one cares about Kobo anymore. Smashwords is really just a middleman that takes money out of your pocket for the convenience of you uploading to one place, and then it puts it out on those other platforms. So,
well, sometimes I'm just kind of like, great company. It's a company. It's there to generate money for other people. If you're looking for a best friend, buy a fucking dog.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry that sucks, but they're not your buddy. Like,
no, it's a business partner.
Right. So we have a couple other comments. The team houses. No, wait. I'm sorry.
That's Mr. Jack Murphy. Yeah.
The team house stream. Mr. Jack Murphy apparently says, "Man, the average person just reads a few pages before bed to help them fall asleep. Most people don't want to read an intelligent book." Would you tend to agree with that, Jack?
First off, this is Mr. Jack Murphy's debut novel, Reef of Fire.
Nice.
This book fucking kicks ass. Jack Murphy is a great guy. If you like really well done, modern to slightly future style paramilitary action, uh, written very accurately and very authentically, uh, pick them up. They're fantastic. Highly recommended to anyone. Uh, anyhow, yes.
Hey, I asked him
Murphy,
put some links to his books in chat. If people want to pick them up, hey, click on them. I'm all about, hey, it's having fun.
I can hit up your Twitch stream or your Twitter stream later and throw in the Amazon stuff.
Perfect.
Yeah, Jack's a great guy. Before we go anywhere, I promised other people that I do some shout outs.
Do it
real quick.
Do it. Shout them out.
My good friend Dan, who has always been my writing partner, he actually partnered with me in a way to do a sister series to my Commando novel, a Ranger series. So trying to align this with the camera and the delay. It's a little awkward.
It gets a little weird.
Yeah, he's only written one. He has two small children running around.
Ranger, Operation Axe Hammer.
And he also put out a couple of fantasy novels.
The Grand Masquerade.
If you like Game of Thrones style, sort of grim, hardcore fantasy.
If you like Game of Thrones style, hardcore fantasy type things, check it out.
My friend Justin put out this swashbuckling historical style novel,
Honor Among Thieves.
Justin's a great guy. He is a rapier fencing expert.
Ooh.
And he's very impressive. Again, I can throw a link to his book.
Yeah, please do.
Twitter later. So yeah. And this is the thing. It's one of the things that's so important when you get into this business is no one writes alone. No one works in this alone. You build your team. You build your support group. I will say that I have found over the years, frankly, romance writers are probably the most build each other up, supportive group of writers out there. One of the faults, kind of, I think, with some of our thriller writers or some of the action adventure type guys, we all get a little too like, oh, well, do I write better than that guy? Do I got better action scenes? But at the end of the day, we'll all support each other. We're all kind of like, retweet the links, and you can get on Facebook and do shout outs to each other. And that's the thing. You kind of need to build that community because it's really important, especially when your morale is low and, you're trying to put out something that you have just invested months and years of your life into.
Yeah, it's a little bit of it's a little bit of you, right?
Yeah, and you really do need someone to say, like, hey, man, like, that book was good. That book kicked ass. When are you writing the next one?
Right.
Why aren't you already writing it right now? So,
a compound question. So I'm going to lump these two together because they were both from Double D&D Girl. The first part of this says, so for a short story, how does one encourage others or re-inspire themselves to pick up the quill? And then the second piece of that says, and also, what about somebody who is an Audible or books on tape whore?
So, trying to think about the first part of that question. I'm trying to understand, do you mean just in terms of writing short stories? I think it's a good thing to do, but the thing is, you've got to read short stories in order to write short stories. When you talk to people who are really into short fiction, they will tell you, and I agree with them, that it's not just taking a book-length idea and squeezing it down, and it's not taking a book-length idea and chopping it into little pieces.
It's a different beast.
It's a different beast. Yeah. But you know what? Again, I don't teach writing. I caveat that I am not a writing teacher. But, there are books out there that talk about doing writing exercises, things like that will try and help you build that skill set and build confidence in coming up with those ideas. And also, frankly, it's 2021, man. go onto YouTube and look this stuff up. Go onto some of these free online courses, or if you're willing to pay out a little scratch, pay for one of these sort of masterclass type things. Like there are people out there who will help you develop the craft of short story writing. Um, and there are people out there on Amazon where short stories are what they write. Personally, I feel that the novella is a nice length for someone who
What would
wants to write a novel-like story.
what would you say is either your word or page cutoff for a novella, for example?
So I've written 4 now, and they fall between 20,000 and about a little over 30,000 words.
Okay.
A novella is going to be something that you can sit down and read in a couple of hours one evening. Maybe the length of like a good long movie.
Nice.
Let's see. I gotta have 1 or 2 kicking around here.
And I feel like, and while you're looking around for that,
Yep.
Double D&D Girl says that she has a friend who's very talented. It just hasn't published in a while, and they're just trying to encourage. So I think this is a little bit of a, hey, if you are a person who knows someone who's like that, what is some good ways to encourage someone who might be either trying to get back into it or who has had maybe some success in the past and took a break, whatever it is. Like what sort of things maybe come off as platitudes as opposed to true constructive encouragement. I don't know because I've never published a thing like that officially. So, I'd be curious if you have any advice or insight onto that.
Yeah, you know what? Frankly, what I would do is don't leap into self-publishing first. Look to places like Wattpad, which is a place where you can upload fiction. And sometimes writers will do this where they will, if they've got a big enough fan base, they will upload to Wattpad, sneak peek chapters, and they will get feedback from their readers or just encouragement, and they'll build buzz that way. That's a good place where if you write short fiction, you can post it for free and people can read it for free and sort of comment. I mean, Tumblr was big for this back in the day before Tumblr took its unfortunate hit when they decided to nuke porn on there. And now, like, 90% of people don't go to Tumblr. But, like, post in there. I know fanfic is really big or was really big on Tumblr.
And shipping.
People would just, stuff like that, which I have nothing wrong with it.
Hey, who gives a fuck, right? If people want it.
Well, it's a good way to build your storytelling skills. And I mean, that's what screenwriters do. They write spec scripts. They take someone else's stories and characters and they build on them. There's nothing wrong with that. I wouldn't recommend in any way, shape, or form trying to sell that. You're going to get in trouble. But if you want to sit down and write some Rick and Morty fanfic,
make it a Patreon. Make it a Patreon or something, right? Look, I crank these out over here. You want me to do more of them? Here's my Patreon. I put shit out over there. Whatever. Or tip me on Ko-Fi, whatever it is, right?
Yep. And there's also nothing wrong with using those, especially Patreon. Now, the thing is, unless you're really super lucky, you need to have an audience before you do a Patreon.
That's true.
It's not going to go the other way around.
Right.
But Patreon is a great place if you get a foothold in the writing market to develop that audience, because people who are on Patreon and have paid patrons, those people become those readers are very tight knit with those writers. They're very fanatical.
Right.
I would say, not in a scary way, but like, you can video chat or message them, and like, you're developing that relationship with your readers in a way that you even kind of don't do over social media, because social media, the signal to noise ratio is so bad. The ability to do that through Patreon.
That's a great point.
Powerful. And I know there are a lot of writers out there who make a lot of money on Patreon. And, and that's in addition to their sales, and more power to them. You know what? creatives in general, and this is a whole topic for another day if we want, creatives in general just undervalued. They're undervalued in society. And to be able to directly contribute money into that person's pocket, not for that specific book, but to say, hey, you are a creative person. You're putting something out there into the world that the world needs. And frankly, the industry and the economy don't support you the way it should. Here's a tip. Like, here's some actual financial encouragement to keep doing what you do and what you love. So I think Patreon's great. I mean, the company might be a little problematic there, but there's other things. There's Ko-fi, there's Cash App. I mean, there's a million ways now.
At some point, I feel like everything becomes a little bit problematic. It just becomes a look. If you're really looking to support the person that you're looking to support, you can do it one way or another. Do you really want people directly PayPaling you? Probably not. So whether it's Ko-fi or Patreon or one of these other fucking services that are out there, like, hey man, that just comes down to, all right, look, maybe you're not a big published whatever thing, but dude, hey, if it takes you writing on your lunch breaks or whatever, and this is the encouragement that you need, great, do it. Fucking do it. What's the problem with that? Why not? We have a comment here from Bill, a question, Wild Bill Flint, says, any recommended resources for novella structure and form?
You know what? I always get a little twitchy about recommending specific books, but I'd say look towards screenwriting sort of. Well, I happen to have one of the most divisive books in all of screenwriting history on hand, which is Save the Cat.
It's a good book.
There are many people who love it, many people who hate it, but what it will teach you is an exacting structure that fits within a relatively short page count. And, it emphasizes to you that you do not have George R. R. Martin, Tom Clancy style book links to get your story across. You need to chop, get to the point and get the story moving. And I think that's probably a good place to start because, as some of us old school movie aficionados will say time and time again, like, a good 90-minute movie tells a better story than a really fucking boring 2.5-hour movie does.
Oh, look at those! Look at some of those movies from like the 50s and the 60s. Some of them are like 70 minutes, 80 minutes, and they tell a complete story. And some of them are more creative and a better story than the shit that comes out now.
I do have my 3 currently published novellas. One of these is My Only Western. There's a whole story behind it.
Renegade's Revenge.
It's a 20,000-word novella. I have Spiders and Flies, which is a sort of sword and sorcery style treasure hunt in the desert where shit goes awry.
Nice.
And I have The Butcher of Calais. This is about 30,000 words.
Commando Short Bursts. The Butcher of Calais.
The short bursts are short stories and novellas that sort of live in the world of my Commando novels, but take place outside of the main storyline.
Nice.
And this is the origin story of a secondary character, the Butcher of Calais, who it's basically Death Wish in occupied France.
Good.
And that's how I wrote the character, 9 years ago. He's this French Maquisard, the Butcher of Calais, who's the bane of all the Nazis in the Calais region of France. And, I always knew his story was that his wife and daughter had been killed by the Germans, and he began seeking revenge. And years went by, and I was finally like, I need to write that story. I need to just get off my butt and do it. And it's a lot of fun, actually.
GZ DR for Evie says, "Hey, that's the Harry Potter font in Spiders and Flies lawsuit."
Blame the cover artist.
Yeah, go after the cover artist, man. Not.
Actually, don't blame my cover artist. Like, he's a really nice
Whoa.
guy. He's got 2 small kids. You know, I love him.
Hey, wait a minute. Well, are you sure that this wasn't published first? Maybe they stole it from him. We have another comment here, and this is for Dumble D&D Girl, and she says, "I honestly didn't mean monetarily, and I think this is in regards to encouragement and support. She meant wholeheartedly to encourage them to express oneself." Now, I know that for myself, and I don't want to get into this too much, but I've written some stuff in the past, and I've put it out there and asked for feedback and got 0 signal. And that was very disheartening. That was very demoralizing to me. And honestly, it's given me a little bit of a complex where I don't want to share the stuff anymore because I'm too worried about getting nothing back. And then you just feel weird. Hey man, can you read this and tell me it's good? And then people don't say shit and you're like, God, it must be fucking awful. They don't even want to say, like, they're too worried to hurt your feelings to say, God, you fucking suck, dude. Hang it up. So what sort of encouragement can you give that doesn't come across as just platitudes or doesn't do the dreaded, you ready for this? You watching me? Hey man, yeah, I liked it. It was really good.
So I'll fall back on some advice from an author who was a blogger who actually, this guy has no idea who I am, was very influential to me in those early days, a guy named J. Conrad, who ran a blog called The Newbie's Guide to Publishing. And one of the comments he made, which has stuck with me for a decade now, is, unless you are an objectively bad writer, the negative feedback you are going to get is from people who are not your target audience to begin with. So part of the problem with seeking feedback from friends, family, other writers, the internet, whatever, is that people need to be your actual target audience. You need to find someone who actually wants to read the sort of stuff you write. And that's not as easy as it sounds, especially if you're not talking about genre fiction in general. If you're just like, I've got, some like short stories in my head that just have been rattling around, or like, back when I was in college, like I always wrote short stories because I really enjoyed that form. And, I've got like 3 notebooks sitting in my desk drawer, the dreaded desk drawer novel syndrome. Every guy over the age of 50 has a fucking desk drawer novel sitting there. This was actually one of my desk drawer novels, I would say. It was a story I wrote a decade before I started publishing and just never gave it another thought. And then finally I was like, oh yeah, I've got that like 20,000 word novella sitting around someplace. Maybe I should blow the dust off that and fucking sell it,
Okay, so let's say you were at that point and I was like, "Hey, I knew you had that and I was excited and wanted you to finish it." Maybe in D&D Girl, you can correct me if I'm wrong. How do I encourage you and give you a positive push without that feeling like I'm just pressuring you? Because I know for some people, as soon as you start to feel pressure, and I know if you quote unquote want to be a writer, it's, well, your job, whatever, but then that feels like work, and then there's aversion to work, and then it's not fun, and then you don't want to do it, and blah, 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 blah. And then that ends up having the absolute opposite effect that you intended, which is now they don't want to do it fucking at all, as opposed to, no, I was really hoping you would get into this again. I just wanted to tell you I really liked it, and I want to be happy. Like, man.
At the end of the day, the only person who can motivate that writer is the writer themselves. I would say, if you have someone who has talent and they don't really either want to, they lack the motivation. Find venues maybe for them. Something like Wattpad or Tumblr. Again, like places out there, they exist where people are posting writing for free. And people go out there and read them. Like Wattpad is hugely popular. I don't know, maybe it's not anymore, but like a few years ago, Wattpad was the thing. It was huge. And I have a friend of mine who, she didn't use Wattpad. I think she was using Tumblr. She was writing fan fiction, and she was terrified. She was an old personal friend of mine, and she would talk about this on Facebook all the time. That I have fanfic stories I want to write. I have no idea if they're any good. So she finally created a Tumblr account, started following Tumblrs of other people who wrote similar fanfics, and just put her stuff out there. And she said it was one of the most validating things she had ever done, because it became this non-contractual validation where you're not worrying about that person paying money to read. You're not asking them to write you an Amazon review or to sit down with the red pen or the highlighter and edit your story for you. You're just putting it out there and saying, hey, you know what, like, this is something that this seems to be the audience for it. What do you think? And maybe someone will read it, maybe they won't. You need to find the target audience. You need to find the people who are actually going to be interested in reading what you've written. Which is why I tell people, do not have your fucking mom read the book.
Right.
Don't have your wife read the book. Don't have your brother read the book. Don't have the guy in the fucking cubicle next to you read the book. A, they don't care. B, they're probably not going to finish it. C, they're probably just a brainless schlub who doesn't know anything about that subject. I mean, they might be smart people, but it's like,
well, I like Jack Murphy's thing. He says same goes for those writer groups where people critique your writing. A lot of them are trying to be Honor de Balzac or whatever, and you just want to be Mickey Spillane. So some people, like I know some people who are all into, like I have a friend of mine, I love her to death, and she lives in the UK, and she is so into history and this perfectionist bent academic that sometimes I'm like, I just want to know, like, dude, it's like mashed potatoes. Do you want more? Like, I just want to know, do you want more mashed potatoes? I didn't cook up this. It's fucking mashed potatoes, dude. Fucking, like, shit mashed potatoes. It's easy. Like, but mashed potatoes, people are like, more mashed potatoes, please. Like, you got to know who you're looking for one versus the next. Like, I'm not looking for this critical, is every single reference I made accurate? Come on.
Sidebar though, if you don't want a career filled with people sending you emails that go, of your book, just want to point out, don't write historical fiction in any form whatsoever. Jack has heard me rant about this. I actually gave a symposium on historical fiction, and it was, some lovely people. Like, there's nothing wrong with them. But, these were sort of the literary fiction types. And I was like, you know what? Harry Turtledove wrote a best-selling novel called The Guns of the South, where fucking time travelers showed up in the Civil War, gave everyone fucking AK-47s, and that man probably bought a fucking house on the royalty estate on that.
That book is awesome.
Yeah, no one gives a shit if you Cowboys versus Aliens, yeah, motherfucker, like, go ahead and write it. But you know what? If you write Cowboys versus Aliens and it's set in 1871 and your character pulls out of his holster an 1873 Colt revolver, you are fucked, because everyone is going to go on to Amazon. They're going to take that one tiny little fucking piddly detail and they're going to rip your goddamn throat out about it. So that's the thing. Do not have someone drive a model of car in which, didn't exist, whatever, because historical fiction readers, this is their jam, baby. This is what they live for. And I'm not trying to blame them. I read historical fiction sometimes too. Bernard Cornwell is one of my favorite authors of all time.
Well,
but
look, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I know, and I maybe have somebody who's lurking who's watching this, but that's just like kink writing or like the BDSM stuff. If you don't really know what you're talking about, you're going to have like a 30-70 split. 30% of the people are going to go, wow, that's what this is like? I love this. And then the other 70% who are like, wow, I really wanted to see this because that's my thing, and I thought you knew what you were talking about. This isn't like this at all. I hate this. All these references are wrong. This is bullshit. So...
I as much as I financially succeeded off writing about British commandos, and I will one day get back to it. That's a whole other story. I haven't written one of those books in a little while. And you know what? There are probably a couple people from Britain out there. I think one of your mods is British. So
he is.
Chill, first off. Chill.
He is super chill.
Right. But
he doesn't give a fuck.
People are super fucking twitchy about anything that smacks of inauthenticity. I've received some of the most polite yet pain in my fucking ass emails from Brits who'd be like, love your book, so wonderful. Thank you for writing these, highly enjoyable. However, it'll be like,
actually,
no Britain in 1941. It's like,
nobody else gives a shit.
Just to get back at that entire island nation, the next time I write a British character, they're going to be microwaving a fucking cup of tea, and they're going to be like, oh, this is the most delicious cup of tea I've ever microwaved my entire life. And heads will fucking just pop like cherry bombs.
As it turns out, putting the tea bag in the water whilst I microwave it is the superior method.
And then pour the milk in while the tea bag's in there, Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah.
That makes me laugh way harder than it probably should.
So historical fiction, it's tough. And actually...
Holy shit! Wait a second! Doing that intentionally would be amazing. New genre. Brit cringe. I bet you could make a fortune.
Just drink in the hate. It just allows you to keep going.
Oh my god. Brit cringe. Imagine walking into a bookstore and they have like
the whole label.
Religion, self-help, fantasy, Brit cringe. And there's one book and it's yours. But there's like 1,000 copies and they can't keep them in stock fast enough.
And the cover is just a microwave. It's a little window. And you can see a mug. And a little
tea bag!
Hanging off of it.
Celestial seasonings!
Yeah.
Fucking genius, dude. That's it. We made it, fam. Everybody send your Brit cringe ideas into Jack Badelaire on Twitter, and Jack Murphy we'll get this together, and this will be a Cigar Gargoyle Lounge exclusive. We'll turn it into a publishing house, the exclusive publisher of Brit cringe. All American spellings. Color is COLOR. There's no U in it.
That actually drives me crazy because for that particular series, I tried to write in British English, so I use the U's and everything.
Red squiggles.
And it actually vexes me because then I'll write a whole novel like that, and then I will be done with it and find myself writing using that spelling. And,
isn't that just your favorite? Holy shit. I'm sorry. I'm laughing so hard I'm coughing. Double D&D girl comments, basically, and this just goes back to encouragement, that you don't want to sound false and you don't want to give false praise, but you want things to be genuine and constructive. So, I don't know. Is there a way, like, okay, for example, let's just say you send me some piece of writing, and let's just say we divide it into 10 pieces, and I like 8 pieces, but there's 2 pieces of it where I'm like, man, that's just these 2, you got to get rid of this. How do you do that without being either A, totally demoralizing, or B, saying, wow, I really love the rest of this, and then they completely overlook that fact. I mean, I don't know. I think that's what she's getting at, is basically just how can you be both encouraging but also provide enough critical feedback so that you don't get the dreaded, I liked it, it was good.
Honestly, I'm probably, I should say unqualified, but I'm not the kind of person who would probably give the best advice about that. And a lot of it does come down to you need to find what I call a writing partner. And honestly, Dan Eldridge is my writing partner. We have been friends for over 20 years. We've written books side by side for many years now. And he's one of these people I will fall back on, and I'll say like, "Hey, does this work?" And the good thing is that Dan is a good writer. He knows how to tell a good story. He knows how to build good characters, but he doesn't necessarily write in the sorts of things that I write or the style in which I write. So he is a good sounding board because he is not someone so close to the source material that he is just going to fall into it and become uncritical, but he is technically proficient enough to see the errors and yet enjoy it. You know what I mean? So
there's trust.
Very difficult.
There's some trust, right?
This actually, I did a Zoom panel a couple months ago about writing during the pandemic, and this came up around the topic of beta readers, basically people who read your books pre-publishing. And I consider Dan what I call an alpha reader, not that kind of alpha. People, calm yourselves. I know you. There's a demographic out there in the audience.
Yeah, bro. Yeah, fucking bro.
There's alpha readers. Sexy alpha readers. And if you know what a fallen alpha is out there, if you know, anyhow, I consider alpha readers people who read while you're writing. They're people who you can hand chapters to, or send bits of text or dialogue and say, like, does this work? Does this not work? They're the people who are reading it before the story is actually finished. Beta readers are typically people who read the work once it's done and you've made a pass through it and you've said, like, okay, this is acceptable for a human being other than myself to read it, but it's not ready for publishing. And you hand it off to the beta readers, and they can provide feedback, but it's probably at the point where you're not going to go through, unless there's a gigantic glaring error, you're not going to go through and be like, oh shit, I got to remove 4 different chapters and I'm going to move this arc to here or there. Like, that's probably not where beta readers are coming in. They're mostly the people who'll be like, hey, you know what, the dialogue here, I think it probably get tightened up a little bit or whatever. And a lot of people, like on Patreon, will oftentimes use their patrons as beta readers. And the readers, the fans, kind of treat that as like an early access kind of benefit. So again, I don't really know how to answer her question in terms of providing a perfect solution. At the end of the day, the writer is going to write or not write based on what's in here, what's in the heart, and what's also going on up here. Like, writing is a really difficult process. And I've been doing this for a decade. I've sold tens of thousands of books. I've made a good amount of money off of this. I have had stories in my head trying to get out ever since I was a little kid. And there are still nights where I'll sit there at 3:00 in the morning staring at the ceiling going, Jesus Christ, the fuck am I doing? Like, am I done? Is this over? So it's within you. And people need to understand that it is a very lonely process. And you can give advice and you can send encouragement and you can provide critical feedback. But at the end of the day, if the writer either can't accept it or won't accept it or just doesn't have the emotional bandwidth to accept it and to move with it, you are not going to be the engine which drives them to success. They have to do that themselves. But you can provide encouragement, you can provide resources, you can help them find answers to things, but they're going to have to do it on their own. And that's, if I'm going to give any piece of harsh advice, and I know we've had a long discussion about harsh advice, it's that if you don't have the personal motivation to sit down and write tens of thousands of words that are going to come together and build a coherent story, you need to find that motivation yourself. It's not going to be money. It's not going to be seeing the book on a shelf in a local bookstore. It's not going to, be the fact that your mother loves it or your spouse or, whoever. It's that you wanted to write that story. You wanted to get it out there in the world. It's lived in you as long as you can remember, and you're just giving it air. If you can't do that, either find a way to do that or find another outlet for it.
Yeah,
Drawing, painting, role
right.
playing games, something. Like there's nothing wrong with being a creative person, but you're going to have to find a mechanism that allows you to develop those muscles and the confidence within yourself to make it happen. It's not easy and it's not for everyone. It can be for most people, although I think there is a segment of the population out there who says over the water cooler, oh, I could write a novel. And
I could do that. It's just typing. I know how to type.
I do not jive with the Hemingway-esque, oh, writing is easy, you just sit at the typewriter and bleed. I'm like, yeah, okay, sure, buddy. No one's actually bleeding unless you give yourself a paper cut. But like,
Well, it's so. I think that just comes back to there's. So I like analogies a lot, and to me, that's sort of like the transmission in a car or vehicle, right? So fine, if you want some encouragement to get going, yes, you should totally do this. You should get into it. I think you have some cool ideas. Give it your best shot. Get in there. Right. Do it. Like, I've read the stuff you've written in the past. That's great. Awesome. Like, give me what you got, and I'll be honest and do it. On the same token, as you're moving up through the gears, the person who's doing that, you're either going to possess a level of maturity that you know and eventually at some point understand. That's going to be like, okay, it's a thing that it's not easy. Like, you have to have some discipline to do that like you're going to do anything. But you don't necessarily need to point that out. That's a piece of that person's own journey and learning and understanding that. And if they kind of don't get it, they're either probably too young or maybe a little too naive. But even if they are, that's their path to walk. Like, okay, like, so maybe you write one book in your entire life. Fine. That's what that takes. That's what that takes. If the story is good, the story is good. Tell it. Like,
it's funny. In all the times I've taught self-publishing, you would think, like, if this was a movie, if this was Throw Him Off from the Train, when he's sitting in that fiction writing class, and the woman's like, dive, said the captain. I love Throw Him Off from the Train. It's a class full of writer wannabes, and everyone sucks. It's not like that at all. The times I've taught it, almost everyone, with maybe one or two exceptions, no one wanted to write genre fiction. It was, oh, I survived cancer and I wanted to write a memoir of my health journey. Or I just want to write a children's book for my kid. Or, what was the other one? It was someone who wanted to write a cookbook and release that. It was almost entirely people who did not want to go on to have a career as a novelist, and certainly not a fiction genre novelist. So, that's the other side of publishing, which we've kind of not talked a lot about, but is important to acknowledge, is that self-publishing, when most people think self-publishing, you're thinking like you're saying, it's kind of shitty genre fiction, which is entertaining and cheap, and people write it fast and you can consume a lot of it, and that's great. But you know what? Like, a lot of self-publishing is, I've got it here because I grabbed a whole fucking stack of this stuff. I'll just sort of slam through these.
Good.
Writing zines.
Men of Violence.
This is a great periodical zine. It's just a zine on book reviews and shit like that. You've probably seen this, and if not, I know Filmology. So I forget what your Twitter handle is, buddy.
Bronson's Loose.
This is
on
a print on demand. This is an amazing book. Curved Space: The Adventures of Stella Star. The Starcraft
Space.
Basically fanfic production. This is autographed by Carolyn Monroe.
Oh, dude, that's badass.
I got it on eBay. She did not autograph this in my possession.
It's okay. It doesn't matter.
This is print on demand.
Right.
And again, it's a sci-fi thing. Print on demand. Role-playing games. Like so many people who now do role-playing games, they just do print on demand self-publishing to put them out. Ready for this? I bring this to every class now.
50 ways to eat cock. Healthy chicken recipes with balls.
Yeah. And it's great.
It is great. That's a great book. I gave that to my sister.
Cock with white wine. Let them eat
cock. What about how about fish heads?
It's a cookbook. You want to write a cookbook? You want to put together all of grandma's recipes? Put it out there.
Yeah, but even that, you could just find that, okay, and in writing the recipes, you write your silly little blurbs at the front, and that's your thing. And you have that, just do it.
Blogs and just grab all their articles and put them together. It's a series of essays on some subject that they like. My grandfather was on the USS Alaska in World War II, and he actually put together a really big binder of just information and memory. And one day I want to actually work with my cousins and my uncle and my dad to put it together as a book and put it out on Amazon, because I'm sure people will find it interesting.
I want that. I need that in my life.
Self-publishing isn't just cranking out, novel after novel or fiction after fiction. All it is, technically speaking, and this is how I open every class I teach, it's just you taking on the roles and responsibilities of a traditional publishing house, which is getting a cover, getting the book edited, finding distribution channels, which is what Amazon is. Amazon is not a publisher except for their imprints. Technically, they're just a distributor. You are the publisher. You're determining the price point. You're handling the marketing. And you don't have to do it all yourself. You can, hire on to a la carte services, find a cover artist who will make you a cover. Find a professional editor who will do it for, a price. Find someone whose, job is formatting ebooks, and you pay them $100 and they format your ebook for you. You pay to have BookBub, which is a huge mailing list that handles book deals. You pay them $500, they put your book out to 400,000 people who subscribe. You're just doing the decision making that a Random House or Zebra Books or one of these other places would do for you. It doesn't mean you're some talentless hack sitting in your basement cranking out James Bond fanfic. You're just going through a technical process that a publishing entity normally does, but you're making those decisions and delegating the work on your own and spending your own money on it.
Do you think
that's all self-publishing is?
Do you think,
and that can be about anything?
Do you think there's a little bit, and this might sound like a wild sort of a parallel, but I'm very much a fan of, say, karaoke. And one of the reasons why I like karaoke is because when you're going to do it, you're going to go up there and there's nobody else up there. So you don't have to be the best singer. You don't necessarily have to know the words. You don't necessarily have to have a great voice. But at some point, enthusiasm and passion can win over people that are listening to you. And if you aren't willing to go up there and do that and just bear it out and just go, fuck it. Like, I'm either going to have fun doing this or I'm not. Okay, look, if you're going to grind it out and you want to try to just financially. Well, then fine. Maybe that's not the game for you. But on the same token, like, all of the responsibilities kind of on your shoulders. You don't have a backup band. You don't have it. Like, that's just you up there, dude. So, hey, sometimes you might go up there and it might flop. And it's okay if you do. Because you're, like, everything can't be a win. You're not, like, life is not about having a 100% success rate. It's about, hey, when things don't necessarily go great, you just gotta go, well, okay. And you move on to the next one. And you try better. Like, just keep going. Just keep moving forward. One foot in front of the fucking other, in front of the other. It's about ever forward energy. Like, don't sit, oh, well, that last one wasn't successful. Maybe I really suck. Man, if that's going to be your thing, then maybe this isn't for you. Because I'm going to tell you, not all of them are going to be successes. Look at even some of the, like, I mean, come on. Some of the best authors out there, you read books and you're like, yeah, but that book sucked. Like, oh, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. Not everything is going to be great. Not everything's going to be amazing. But that's not what it's about. That's not what it's about. And if you get caught up in that, you're going to get demoralized by the first time your voice cracks on the microphone.
It's very true. Very true. And I was going to interject with some. Oh, I remember what I was going to say. One of the benefits, as you were saying, like, you can get up there and sing and it's kind of all on you. It's also, nothing's permanent. Like, if you write a book and it sucks, the cover is shit, you discover 10 spelling errors the first time you sit down and read it after it's been published. You know what? You go onto Amazon, you go to kdp.amazon.com, you upload a new manuscript.
Right?
I've got here, my desk is completely covered in books right now. Just to show you.
Show them all! Yeah.
The evolution of some of what I've done.
Yeah, bear them all. Show them all. I want to see you bear.
Show it. Whip it out.
Show it.
I'm not whipping it out, people.
Uh-oh.
So, like, the very first short story, well, not the very first, Rivalry, the ghost story that I put out. I don't have a physical copy of that because it was too short. But this right here, this ridiculous little novel, Nanak and the Tower of Sorrows, it's like 11,000 word short story, and it's basically me just writing a parody of, like, Conan the Barbarian.
Nanak in the Tower of Sorrows.
There's dick jokes and references to Arnold Schwarzenegger movies and a Beastmaster reference and, like, a demon getting his dong cut off. Like, it's ludicrous. But you know what? Most people actually fucking love it.
Oh my God, it sounds amazing.
One of the most scathing reviews of a book I've ever received is because of this. Because you know what? That guy was not my target audience.
Right?
Because he thought everything that was ridiculous and overblown, which was amazing, he hated. Anyhow, go check it out. But, like, so this was my cover. Like, I made this in Photoshop. I grabbed some, stock art. This little dude here in the middle is like stock art. I made this right here in Google Draw. And then the fog was in effect. I think my friend Dan helped me Photoshop that. And then I picked, like, a cool, weird retro font for the thing. And, like, but then
I have seen worse covers. I've seen way worse covers.
So my cover artist then produced this for me, which I like this cover. I think it's great. But you know what?
I like yours better.
This doesn't suck.
Right.
And that's the thing. You will hear a lot about covers. And a cover is extraordinarily important. But what's the most important thing is that the cover doesn't suck. Do not use an illegible font. Do not misratio your stock cover image so everything's squished, and off. Where is it?
Can I use a weird? So this is a weird hard left or right turn from that. But let's just say that the cover that the original one you did had the guy and he's standing there, but instead of raising a sword in a tower in the background, he's just laying in a bed and there's just like I don't know, a penis in his mouth or fucking like there's a little bit of the but if it's the target audience thing, is the cover going to be like, hey, if I'm looking for a warrior novel, I want a dude with a sword and fucking towers and adventures. So as long as you have that somewhere, cool. If he's sleeping in a bed because, as it turns out, he's just a dreamer dreaming about being an adventurer, well, I don't really want to read that. So,
well, the cover has to convey the message you need it to convey, but it doesn't have to be complicated. So here's a good example. This right here is the cover, the original cover to Killer Instincts. This is my first big novel. And here's the thing. The font is legible, and it's legible thumbnail size. Like, you could read that, right? It's got a big fucking Uzi on it, so you know people are going to die. Like, there's going to be gunfire.
I like Uzis.
You know what goes on in a book called Killer Instincts,
right.
When there's a fucking submachine gun on the cover.
Yeah, it's not a Wall Street book. It's not a Wall Street book about stocks.
A killer just pull the trigger. I think they figured out what this book is about. However, and you know what? And the Uzi isn't some squished, like, bad, pixelated, file or whatever. So that's not a bad cover. You look at it and you're like, okay, like it's not going to wind up on badcovers.com or whatever. But this is the cover, the current cover. I went out there and I found a professional cover artist, and this looks like the cover of a book you'd see in an airport bookstore.
I'd buy that book. When I used to travel for work, that's exactly the sort of book that I would buy in nearly every fucking airport.
Right? It's a dude. He's in a silhouette. There's some shit going on.
Looks badass.
It says Killer Instinct. Someone's going to fucking die.
Yeah. Yeah, dude.
So you know what? Like, yeah, one of these covers is a whole lot more professionally done, but they tell you the same thing.
That's a great point.
It's going to be a book with violence. This is going to be appeal to a certain demographic. So there's nothing wrong. Sorry, I'm trying to figure with this cover, in my opinion.
No.
If someone put this out as their first book, I'd say, hey, you know what? Good job. This cost me like $8 because I just downloaded off of Shutterstock.com or whatever the image of the Uzi. That's all it cost. Where's another good example?
The volume may change, but the song remains the same.
This is my 1970s era hard target kind of violent crime fiction.
Hangman, San Francisco Slaughter.
This is the cover I made. I sort of played around in Photoshop a little bit with a stock image of 1911.
Dude, it's kind of legit. I like it.
Lots of people have actually said they prefer this cover. This cover right here is actually my favorite book cover of any of the book covers I've had done for me. I think it looks fucking awesome.
That's pretty cool.
That's
pretty sweet.
San Francisco Bridge. I love the font. I love everything about it. But you know what? This isn't a bad book cover.
No.
The font is legible. You can see this in the thumbnail.
Right.
You look at it. It's called San Francisco Slaughter, and Slaughter's in red. What the fuck you think is going to happen in this book? People are going to get shot in the face, and that is in fact what happens. So it's like this cover conveys every piece of information you need to decide whether you want to buy this book. And it doesn't look like shit. The font is a well-proportioned, legible font. The image.
That book's not about the beef industry? It's not a beef industry book? Oh.
So, like, that's the thing. And this is like a $400 cover. This is an $8 cover. And Photoshop, but I have Photoshop for free because I'm aware of work. So, like, that's the thing, is if you're good at what you can do, it doesn't need to be complicated. And the worst thing people can do when they make book covers is to try and make something like this, but they don't have the skill. So they slap a bunch of stock photo images together in a haphazard fashion that doesn't look good. They use poor font choices. They use poor color profiles, and it looks like fucking garbage.
Would you say?
And there are whole websites out there dedicated to taking these books apart for fun. Would
you say it's a little fair to say that people try to make the second cover, but they don't understand why the first cover is quote unquote good enough and does what it does.
Yes, that's exactly it. Is that they think, yeah, yeah, yeah. That's basically it.
And I feel like it's the same for a lot of the writing.
Yeah, right. They reach too high, you know. And it falls back to the perfect is the enemy of good enough. You know, yeah, you can have a cover that's too bland. Of course, you
Right.
can, but this is where doing your homework comes in. There are a number of bloggers and websites out there that do book cover analysis, and in fact, some of them are really good because they do. I can probably tweet you a good link, but there's a guy out there. His name's Joel Friedlander, and he runs a blog where he does monthly book cover contests. And not only does he give awards and such these book covers, but he'll sit down and actually analyze why the covers are good. And a lot of it does come down to good fonts that are appropriate for the genre and the audience, that are legible, that look good as an ebook thumbnail on Amazon. I mean, we all buy books on our phones now. Like, this is where we do the shopping. It's 1 centimeter by 2 centimeters. You know, you need a book cover that's legible at that size, that conveys a message on a postage stamp. So, like, that's what you need to be thinking about. You need a cover that conveys your genre, that conveys the tone and the character of your story. Beyond that, everything else is just gravy. You know, it's sure you can give it kind of a glam up, but you know, you can try doing that and get it wrong, and it's gonna look like dog shit, and no one will buy it.
Right.
So,
well, it is about 1 o'clock in the morning for me, and
kidding. It is 1 o'clock. It is 1 o'clock in the morning. Wow.
Granted, we had a little bit of some difficulty at the beginning, but I feel like we turned this around, and this was a fantastic talk. Did we necessarily get to all of our questions in order? No. Do I really care? No. Because much like what we were talking about earlier, I feel like we captured the essence of what we really wanted to discuss, which was some pitfalls and some tips, and I hate to say tricks because it sounds so stupid. Oh, there's some tips and tricks. Here's just some general fucking advice and stories and experience from the trenches about the craft of writing and also the financial end of getting it out there and getting it published in a professional sense. Plus, cat in the background now. By the way, kitty cat finally showed up. So I feel like that's a good omen. Wild Bill comments, yeah, this was fucking solid right here. And that is about the most glowing endorsement and review that I can get of this particular episode. And man, we'll have to do this again sometime if you're willing. You know, I love doing these hangouts where you have other people share their insight and talk about things. You know, we've had Stacy Buzz, she's a actress from Boston, talking about acting and filmmaking, and I love listening to these particular stories. I'm very much okay with, hey man, you ask a question or whatever, and you sit back and you let the guest say what they want to say. Like, it's all about you. I'm just a giant bald idiot who comes on here fucking at 11 o'clock at night and drinks his whiskey and sings Fishhead songs. So, you know, in that regard, I feel like there's some great advice and some great sort of insight into this particular process, especially the idea that, look, this is all about, did you reach your target audience? Do people really want to read more of this or not? Like, you can, what's that? The death of 1,000 cuts? You can do that to yourself really easy. Right? You can totally blow your toes off, make a crappy cover, do whatever else. But like, man, at the end of the day, just do it. Just do it. Just fucking write the thing. Maybe it's not great, but you won't know until you just write it. Just write it.
No, that's what it comes down to. I mean, And I would say now more than ever, even though there are people on both sides of the publishing house, writers and business people, who still look with question or disdain at the process, now more than ever, people understand that it is an option. It's not an option for everyone, but it doesn't mean that you're some talentless fucking hack who couldn't cut it and, Random House would never take you, etc., etc. Like, if anyone out there has seen The Martian with Matt Damon and a shit ton of other amazing actors, a fantastic movie,
It's a
a
really good
great
movie.
novel, Andy Weir wrote The Martian as a blog that he started as basically a way to tell a story that solved a series of scientific and engineering conundrums. And people really liked this blog and were commenting on every chapter he wrote and every problem he solved and the science that he used and so on. And then people started pestering him like, hey, dude, like, I love reading this. I think it was after he had finished it. And they were like, but I hate reading this on a website. Can you just make this an ebook? And Andy Weir was like, huh? What? I guess so. Sure, fine. And he found some doofy stock photo of something that looked like Mars, and he put The Martian on top of that with Andy Weir at the bottom, and he put it on Amazon for 99 cents because that's the cheapest you could sell it for. And then he just forgot about it because he's like, yeah, hey, if you want to read it as an ebook, it's on Amazon. Go ahead and read it as an ebook. And then he forgot about it more or less until one day when he was like, what's this royalty statement I got from Amazon? And he went to go look
It's like
at
$1
the
billion.
dashboard, and he had sold like tens of thousands of copies. And, it was like, holy shit, what just happened? So that's the thing, is that there's a lot of reasons why you can do this. Money is one aspect, but it doesn't have to be. But you never know. I'm never going to tell anyone that, you know what, you're going to quit your job and you're going to rake in, 90 grand a year for the rest of your life. I know people who have quit their jobs and they rake in like 90 grand a year for the rest of their people who left jobs like project managers, advertising executives, people who make money. That's the other thing. We could get into it all day long if we wanted to, but anyone who's like, you'll never make money as being a fuck those people. They are pieces of shit. They're just going to drag you down. You can make money doing this. You may not make enough money to live on for the rest of your life, but you may make enough money to pay for your car.
We have one last question, and then I've posted that the questions at this point are closed because we're going to wrap this up. But somebody said, and this is a difficult question. If someone were to write a book on COVID-19, would you encourage them to make it fiction to avoid fact-checking, or make it nonfiction and raw as possible to get the truth out about it?
Oh, Jesus.
Okay, well, here goes a half hour. I'm gonna go to bed and.
I would say it depends on the story and the angle that you're trying to tell. There are already people who are writing lockdown novels right now. There's lockdown novels that are already out there being sold. So, first off, people are already beating you to the punch. Boom. There's like lockdown romances, lockdown thrillers, lockdown mysteries.
Ooh.
There's probably post-apocalyptic variations where COVID-19's killed off, half the population, and we're all shooting COVID zombies in the head.
Well, that's going to happen. That's reality.
Yeah. So it really comes down to what story do you want to tell? Are you trying to write this as some sort of, well, a good example might be World War Z, Max Brooks. He wrote a story about a fictional zombie apocalypse, but he wrote it from the point of view of a memoir written like 20 years after it happened. That's one way to look at it. You could write something like that, which tells the story of the event, but tells it in a fictionalized way while still sticking to the reality as much as possible.
Right.
or you could just write it that it's something happening in the background, and that's the catalyst of the events, but not really what you're. I mean, that's essentially what like wartime fiction is. And post-apocalyptic fiction is kind of the same way. It's that happens in the background. The nuclear fallout or the zombies or whatever. The real story isn't the zombies. The real story is the people trying to survive a very hostile world. So it depends on the story you want to tell. I'd say if it's nonfiction,
Are you looking
make a
to?
blog out of it.
Yeah, I mean,
unless, and I'm not going to judge anyone here, unless you're trying to write some sort of saucy conspiracy theory tell-all where you are spare changing the events together to form a particular narrative that's going to appeal to a certain demographic who you're going to fleece for money. Hey, if you want to write that, go for it. You might be able to pay for a private jet with the money you make off that. But that's the thing. If it's going to be a nonfiction thing, there's got to be an angle. There's got to be an audience. Who are you trying to sell that book to? Is it a historical breakdown like any of the like 15 histories of World War II I've got over here? No one's going to fucking care. I can go to Wikipedia and learn that.
Well, I feel like that's an interesting maybe question, because if you reread the question, if you're writing this, would you encourage them to do it one or do the other? I think the answer to the question is the question itself. Which are you looking to say? Are you looking to write this as a scientific treatise on what happened, or are you just telling a story because you just want to tell stories, want people to read some shit you made up? Whichever. I mean, one may sell, the other may sell, neither may sell. Which one gives you the most fun writing? Write the one that makes you the most fun, I guess. I don't know.
And I mean, there's going to be people out there who are going to write and sell, and maybe they'll be successful, maybe they won't be, stories of losing their parents or losing their children to this, or they survive it but they're a long hauler, and 2 or 3 years from now they're going to write a memoir about their road to recovery, things like that. I live in Boston. We had the Boston Marathon bombing. I don't know if anyone who was in that actually wrote a book, but you could, God forbid, you have your leg blown off, and I think that's what a couple of the characters in the movie that they made on it, someone who gets their leg amputated and then they go on like a couple years later to run in the marathon again. And so you could be a person who survived, having COVID, and you could write about you living through the beginning of it, and then you get it, and then maybe it sucked and you wound up in the hospital on a ventilator for a month or whatever, and then you recovered from it, but then there's hospital bills, and so there's there's as many stories as people on this planet who are dealing with this thing right now.
Right.
So there's going to be stories about that, and they're going to be out there. So whatever someone writes, it's not going to be entirely unique. Like I said, there's already COVID fiction. There's going to be COVID conspiracy books. There's going to be COVID histories. There's going to be COVID scientific journals. There's going to be COVID memoirs. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't write it. Go ahead. Try. Knock it out of the park.
A million people in a million places out there make hamburgers. Just make sure that people want your hamburgers more than they want the other guy's hamburgers. Why? Who knows?
Don't pair it with Clamato juice, though.
Just don't eat a Clamato. Oh, my God. All right. Side offshoot. I think I'm going to have to go back. I said on an episode that was going to be the end of it. I don't think it's the end of it.
Well, that's right. You said you need to do it right? You've got to do it correct. Is that like someone who drinks beer and says, I hate beer? And then, no, you don't hate beer. You just haven't had the right kind of, or scotch. Oh, no. You haven't, you tried Ardbeg. Oh, no.
You just haven't had the right one, dude.
You want Dalmore.
Yeah.
That's the good stuff. Oh, yeah.
Can I use a cursed phrase? Well, you just haven't had a real one yet.
Yeah, exactly.
Every time somebody says that, I just want to go, you fucker. Fuck you.
Is that like the conies?
You haven't had a real... Oh, look at that Coney pin.
You haven't
Look
had
at that!
a real Coney.
That is a true... I died, and I've been resurrected because I am now an actual zombie. I died when I saw those, and I was like, that is literally the perfect fucking thing to give away as a prize / trinket for those who come and join this thing. A wooden carved Coney dog. Why? Well, because it's Detroit. That's Coney's. Huh? Most people wouldn't understand, but I feel like you get it.
No.
Jack, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time out to stop by and talk to me, man. Hats off to you. Really, I feel like just some great insights, some great information, some great anecdotes. If you're willing, we'll have to do this again sometime. I feel like we could probably talk
Absolutely.
for another 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours, whatever it may be. We'll have to do this again. Do you have any parting words? Since is the end of the Nightcap, anything you want to say? Anything you want to shout out, scream out, talk about, whatever? Here's your chance. Microphone is yours.
I'd say don't fucking steal my books and sell them on the internet, rewritten as someone else. Someone's already done that. Whole other story. It didn't end well for them.
Oh,
Let's point that out.
I shouldn't write books as Jack Badelaire.
Yeah. All I'd say is that, like, you know what, I'm just one point of experience here, and what I've done might not work for you, or it might work even better. There are a lot of resources out there. Do your homework. That's the most important thing. If you're going to get into this now in 2011, you know, I started 10 years ago, and I wasn't even an early adopter. There were already people out there who were writing books called, you know, How to Sell 1 Million Copies on Amazon when I started in 2011. So we are well beyond the early adoption stage here. So if you're going to start this with the goal of making money, you need to be good. But depending on how much money you want to make, you can do it, and it's achievable. It's all about, and I say this at the beginning of every class I teach, it is about what is your point of aim? What is your end goal? Are you writing a memoir about your grandfather's time in World War II, and all you really want to do is have it put together in a book that maybe you can put on Amazon and some of your cousins and distant family members can buy and read, and you can print out 10 copies and, you know, and just have them on a bookshelf? Then fuck it, do it. Who cares about the money?
Right, just do it.
Together. If you want to do it, you know what? Where is it? I did this. I paint miniatures. I'm a fucking nerd. I paint little spacemen and shit.
Ooh.
And I get driven nuts all the time because I'll paint someone, and then 5 years later I need to paint someone who the same paints I'll forget. So I made myself a hobby painting journal through Amazon with little charts that tell me what paint I use for what. It took me like an afternoon to put this together. You know what? It's up there for sale. Someone wants to buy it. If they don't, I don't care. I didn't make this to make money. I did it mostly because I wanted to have this sitting on my desk. You know, so it's like money can be a goal, but it doesn't also have to be a goal. And you know what? When I started out, someone asked me, what monetary success would make you actually feel like you accomplished what you set out to accomplish? And I thought about it for a long time, and I said, you know what? If I can make $100 a month, basically enough money to treat myself for like a pizza and a beer every Friday night or whatever,
Yeah.
then that would be awesome.
Right?
And my first year, I made $60. My second year, I made $600. My third year, I made $6,000. So it can happen.
Woo!
And you know what? That was a long time ago, and the money has gone up and the money has come down, and you know it's a roller coaster ride. But the thing is, it can happen. You can make money. You can sell books. You can make succinct, achievable goals for yourself and hit those. And that boost to your confidence is going to allow you to move on to that next goal and that next goal. And, you're just going to go from there. And maybe you'll hit a point at which you're just not going to be able to push through. And for whatever reason, you can't move more than, 10 books a month. And that's what happens. Well, then that's what happens. Just go into it informed. Some people do great. Some people do terribly. But you know what? If you're like me, when I was a little kid, I was drawing stories before I had the wherewithal to write them out. And then when I was writing them out, I bought myself a typewriter to type them out. And my dad got me a computer my sophomore year of high school back in 1992. And I was filling up little, 3.5-inch diskettes with stories. So I have always been a storyteller. I go to bed every night with stories rolling around in my head. I wake up in the morning with stories rolling around in my head. It is homework that is due tomorrow for the rest of your life.
I like that.
If that actually is kind of cool, then you're going to do this whether you succeed or not. The question is, will you also get paid for it? And will people read it? And will you get emails and tweets from people who are like, hey, man, that book kicked ass. When am I going to read the next one? It can happen. The question is, are you going to put the effort behind it, the time, the energy, the emotional oomph?
But it won't happen unless you try.
Unless you try.
So just try.
Exactly.
Just try it. Well, hey, Jack, I thank you so much for this, dude. This was super fun. This was super cool. We will absolutely have to do this again sometime soon.
You see this fat cat back there?
I do. You had multiple cats. You had multiple cats creeping around back there.
She's not supposed to be eating that food, but the feeder's broken, so she gets into it. Yeah, that cat drops turds that'll clear rooms.
Woo!
Shouldn't be eating that food.
Well, I had 3 conies for lunch, so...
You are an expert on that.
All right. Thank you so much, sir. Absolute pleasure. Hats off to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for having me on here. I'm glad that I kind of stumbled across your stuff out there. I think it was off some of the film review guys, and I kind of was like, hey, what's going on? And I finally watched one of your, I think it was Flexology's lounge episode was my first episode. So
he and I have
started off with one of these interviews, and cool to keep coming back.
He and I have a hilarious rapport because every now and then people are like, you guys look like you're like the same person. It's like, because we are. We're doppelgangers. He even has the same fucking coat. How weird is that? Literally the same fucking jacket. What the fuck? And he only knew about that because this other guy from the UK was like, what about a brown legit? He's like, return it, mate.
Wait, you guys were talking about the coat when I was on that. I think he wears a hat though, right? That's the disguise. You just pre-record yourself.
It's the same guy, just in the future.
That's how you do the different guy.
Yeah.
It all makes sense now.
That's it. I just ran out of the room and I put a hat on. I come back.
Bam. Mystery solved.
Oh, shit. Thank you so much. Everybody out there, please check out Jack Badelaire. Books. Awesome, dude. Thank you so much, man. I really can't thank you enough for this. I look forward to our next talk, our next chat. And in the meantime, if you're hungry, get yourself some quality conies.
I don't know if anywhere in Boston produces a quality coney. I know how food people are. They're like, oh, you can't eat a bagel outside New York City. They're all gonna fucking suck. And maybe there's someone in Boston who makes a coney. Maybe they don't.
You have your work cut out for you, sir.
I'm gonna have to go on a coney quest.
Coney quest. Hey, that sounds like I'd read that fucking book. So, thank you so much, sir. I really appreciate it. We're going to go ahead and raid on to my buddy Deathstrike. He's playing some Tarkov. So, we'll end it with that there. Again, thank you so much, Jack Badelaire, for stopping by and giving me the opportunity to talk to you. And thank you so much for all of the people who sat and watched and listened and participated in the chat and sent through some excellent questions. As always, I really appreciate that. I love you all there. And as we say at the end of all of these episodes, stay safe, keep the faith, and all of that good shit. I will see you again tomorrow at 11 p.m. Have a great night.